how's the experience overall been for, with this story specifically and the tour?
I auditioned 7 times for it.
Wow.
And I
love
booked it on the
that.
7th time. A testament to knowing that your time is going to be your time. As an organizer, I'm able to see is that like no spiritual entity is going to just like emerge and change everything. But it's actually within our realm. Like we're the ones that are supposed to be in control of our own destiny. We can't imagine it differently. It's only been designed this way by certain people who had a vision for this. We have a vision for us to actually win and have our rights and have everything that we deserve. Like you said, we do a lot of things, but it's all streamlined in making resources accessible to break down that barrier of like, I'm an activist. Everybody has the possibility to pull up and pull up for our survival. So
that's great. Welcome back to the I4U podcast. I'm your host, Eddie Wise, and on this episode, we speak to Marla Lou. Marla is a Haitian-born visionary making the revolution irresistible. As an award-winning performer and abolitionist community organizer, as the founder and CEO of Claim Our Space Now. She now enters her producing and writing journey with her work, A Goddess Reborn. On this episode, we speak on her role as a fate in Hadestown the musical, the founding of Claim Our Space Now, and the importance of ritualizing collective action. Thank you so much for watching the show. We really do appreciate all of your time and energy that you spend here. Please don't forget, if you enjoy the episode, subscribe, like the video. It really helps us a lot. It really helps us get this to more audience members. If you're listening on Spotify or anywhere where podcasts are played, please rate our show on any of those platforms and also visit us on our socials. Everything, all of the links to all of the relevant information that we're going to speak on are in the description below. So please don't forget to follow our guests, but also follow us on any pages. And like I said, thank you so much for being here again. And without further ado, enjoy the episode. So I want to start by saying, before we talk about more theater, I want to start by saying thank you so much for being on the show. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you. My pleasure.
It's a pleasure to be here to have a conversation with you. You're so active in the community and you embody a lot of the things that Project Field tries to embody as well. So anytime we can have a community member, an organizer like you on the podcast, we're always super excited to have that. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me and for that very warm welcome at the very top.
I gotcha.
Yes, thank you.
So for those of you who don't know, you heard the cold open at the beginning, but we're going to go back into a little bit of what Marla does. And one of the things that you just got back for, you are in the tour of Hadestown.
That's right.
Which is really cool as a fate in the show, which is, if you haven't seen the show, it's an incredible role, very demanding role.
Demanding. I'm in the basement for the very first time, which feels great. A really show that was written for the low voiced baddies. So yeah, it's been a true dream.
Yeah. How's the experience overall been for with this story specifically and the tour?
Sure. Well, I'll start off by saying it's been a long journey even before booking the show. Like I auditioned 7 times for it. Wow. And I booked it on the 7th time. Wow. And yeah, I was just talking to my assistant Jasmine. I was like, wow, that alone just speaks to the persistence, because it's very easy to get in there and be like, y'all calling me in again, like what is the point?
Yeah.
But after booking and hearing from the producers themselves, like we've been waiting for the day for it to finally align, and like the different roles that I'd been up for, because they knew I was a part of like my spirit and like the work that I do as an organizer, and as it's very much a movement piece, and thinking about our confidence to move past our doubt to build power for ourselves and for the collective. And so the fact that I've been able to get that affirmation from creatives, from everybody that I've auditioned for however many times, like it's only been a matter of like finding the right role for you. We always knew that you were going to be a fate, but it just wasn't open yet, so just a testament to knowing that your time is going to be your time. And it was quick and fast right after that, because it was 5 weeks of rehearsal in New York, or 3 weeks of rehearsal in New York.
3 weeks, wow.
2 weeks on the road to like get costumes fitted and start learning from the folks that were out there, put in rehearsal, all in 5 weeks. And then we opened in LA on October 4th, which was like truly a dream. Like the fact that
Jeez.
that timing. I love the West Coast very
Yeah.
much. A lot of people think that I'm from there, and then I'm like, I'm actually from Wash Heights. What are you trying to say? The New Yorker in me is like, oh, what the hell?
like,
But
hey,
also,
back up. Don't
yeah,
say that again.
exactly. But also, like, I know that bi-coastal life is probably what's going to end up happening between the now newly opened up. I have thoughts about the SAG-AFTRA strike, but we'll talk about that. I'm
Okay,
sure.
yes, we are going to talk about that. Yes,
if we do.
Yes, we will. Yes, we will.
But yeah, so like TV, film, voiceover, things that I know I'll do on the West Coast versus like the theatrical,
Of course, the theater
needs, and Climber Space now too on the since we're based in New York City. So
it's amazing.
All that to say is I'm excited to be here, and it's been an exciting time to be on the tour.
I will say that to have the, like you said, persistence and the confidence and also the stamina to do an audition 7 times. That is brutal. Most people do once and quit acting altogether because of how centered it is on your personality and who you are. People have a hard time, you know, one of the hardest parts about being an actor is separating a rejection from, you know, a statement on your personality or who you are as a person. So I commend you for 7 times, and you're in it now, and you're doing it, and I'm sure it's amazing. That's really, really cool. You talked a little bit already about the story and what it means to you, but how did you, what drew you to the story so much so that you had to be, you know, a part of it, and like you were auditioning so many times? Like what was it that got you there?
You know, my theater instructor from high school had told me, like, I saw the show, you're gonna be in it eventually. Like, you don't have to see it. I'm sure the tickets are expensive, but like, just know that this is gonna come around for you. And so it wasn't until after the pandemic, or not after, we're still very much in it, but when theater was opening up again with safety precautions and things like that, in 2021 that I got the first audition via self-tape. And I heard Living It Up on Top from Persephone's role, Amber Gray. Anytime I hear her in a musical, I'm like, okay, I can sing that too, because she has a gravelly, very non-musical theater traditional voice, similar to me. Because I didn't really get training in college for that. I studied computer science, fun fact.
Wow.
And so like, been doing the theater thing mostly like by doing cabarets with folks that I've met in the industry since the Jimmy Awards, which was really how I got my start in the theater.
The Jimmy Awards, oh my gosh, the classics. Okay,
won that in 2015.
Yes.
Just a
you
little
did?
there, and I had no idea what they were before going in.
That's so cool.
So I like to say that they're like the Tonys for high schoolers.
Literally, that's when you're in high school and you get out of it. People who win Jimmys also go to Broadway.
Do things.
Typically.
Do things. I mean, like Renee Rapp about to be in Mean Girls and is running this here town.
Do you know who?
Equal friends, equal, like, I love her and would like to date her. She knows that already. But
do you know who Jasmine Forsberg is?
One more time?
She's Jasmine Forsberg.
I don't
She's in
think
6.
So. No.
She's going to 6 on Broadway now. She was on the tour. She did there was another show that was like a Filipino cast. She was in that, and then
I'm like trying to think.
I forgot the
was
name.
Was it Here Lies Love?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and then she's going to 6 on Broadway now. But she was also a Jimmy Awards person in Orlando. I met her back then.
Amazing.
It's always that. It's always.
It's a beautiful beautiful company of folks that are paving our own path, because there's literally no one way to be.
Exactly.
Another shout for another Jimmy alum, Jalen Josie, who's a singer-songwriter, truly gifted from the gods up above. That voice, her spirit, everything. So it's just wonderful to be part of that community and having having fellow icons amidst us, just
it's so
paving
cool.
the way. It's really awesome.
That's amazing. I love Broadway. I love theater. I hope to one day somehow make my way back into it, but it's such a challenging space.
Say yes. And it's yes and for improv. Go
yes
ahead.
And.
Say yes.
That's all it takes.
I hope that journey is amazing for you. And obviously here to cheer you on through that.
That's very kind of you.
Of course.
Thank you.
But that being said, I think what did you ask me about Hadestown?
We were talking about the we were getting to the story and what makes you so what draws you to it so much.
Of course. So I think all of us feel the humanity in it. As somebody who was raised in a very traditional and conservative household, I was raised a Jehovah's Witness. And so it wasn't until I left for tour 5 years ago for Beautiful that I was able to finally just exist as myself, figure out who I was beyond the scope of like how my family had raised me, and thinking of that systemically and seeing how that is exactly what the show also implements. It's like, okay, well, keep your head low, don't look up, because then the powers that be will strike you down. I felt that every day. I was surveillance from the witnesses, and having to feel like I had to exist as one way of being to fit into this community that which is all I have ever known.
Yeah.
All I've ever known. Oh dear God. Now, and it's very funny. Like the show references and lyrics come up ever so often.
Yeah.
And it's like, Marla, don't do it. No. But that's just the fact of the matter of theater. Once you do a show, it's on your mind all the time.
It sticks with you. Yeah.
So like the significance of those very human themes, solidarity, love, being able to see two love stories at the same time in different just periods of like young love versus like toiled and tattered, but also finding what that means to come together in love as these gods, Hades and Persephone. There's so much in it, and it's also circular, which is beautiful. I commend Rachel Chafkin, our director, for that. And I've heard a bit of the story of how it used to end and how it starts from the beginning again. And again, as a movement buff who knows that like we see these things in cycles and in loops. So how do we break it to have a different ending?
Yes.
We've been playing with the fact that like on the last performance, Orpheus won't turn around.
Oh wow! Okay.
That will never happen. But like in our hearts, we're saying like what would
hearts.
happen if Orpheus didn't turn around and like he makes it all the way back to
my goodness.
Back home, and Eurydice's with him by her side. Like what does that story look like?
Oh my gosh.
And we get to imagine that, and we get to implement that in our own lives, of course.
Yeah,
so
of
like
course.
what does it look like to, like for me, I've always seen myself in Orpheus the minute that I saw the show, which was only by the time that last time that I had auditioned, I was like, okay, maybe just seeing the show will make a difference too, because I didn't have the fun. I was formerly housing insecure. I was going through a lot of things in the midst of all those auditions. Like many people who are organizers or theater artists, we're all
artists. Yeah.
Because of the way the system's built, they have us doing side jobs and not making enough to survive. Universal basic income immediately, if I can just drop that in. But all that to say is like I finally saw the show, was able to like fully digest it for all that it was, and was like, oh my God, no wonder why I've been up for this so many times. And that I'm pretty sure was a part of the reason why I finally booked too, beyond the fact that the role was right for Fate 3 and understudy Persephone. It was knowing that like I've had my doubts after only being a community organizer for 3 years, thinking that who do I think I am to change what has never been changed before, or like the greats of Angela Davis or Kwame Ture, like all of these icons that were very much like me, like all of us. We're humans and have a dream of a world that's better. We don't have to feel silly about it. It's actually something that can happen. They're just very, very strong and murderous systems that we're up against, quite frankly.
Don't turn around.
Don't turn around. Keep going, and know that there's community by you.
Yeah.
Too, like seeing how the workers interact with Orpheus and that collective driven story that I feel so blessed to be a part of every night.
That's beautiful. I love it. We have a lot of parallels in our stories as well, and it's great because it gives me a new way to see that story as well, because I've only seen it once. I never listened to the soundtrack beforehand. Right. It kind of came at a time where I wasn't diving into shows like I had been before, and hearing it through your perspective is illuminating, and it's really cool to hear that you have such a strong tie to it, and that you're able to show people that connection across the world. That's really, that's pretty sick, and it's, I want to congratulate you for that, and also thank you for sharing your story on that. It's great. As an organizer and as someone who is really a part of this community, you were also very vocal and were a part of the strikes that we were talking about, the SAG-AFTRA strikes that went over the span of I think it was about 118 days, 100 some days. Why do you feel like that strike specifically, for people who may not know, and even for people who do know, from your perspective, why do you feel like that strike was long overdue in this industry?
I mean, I'm sure we're going to see another set of them. the workers versus the barons that are like, we're the ones that are contracting you, do this work.
Yeah.
I think that the reason why it was so critical was because of the way that they were trying to, and have successfully, unfortunately, are about to roll out AI
Yes.
as part of background actors. That there are parts of our industry that will be erased in the next couple of years. And I voted no for the tentative agreement because I knew that the fact that they had announced it before union members had known about it going through, like the press had already known, and we've seen different iterations of this and how quickly the industries were back up after COVID, and it was like, well, we have this thing to fix it all, go back to work, which that's always gives me pause to know that it's always in service of not the people, but for the folks that are the capitalists that are trying to make their money off of our craft, off of our labor and energy. And so, there's a lot of uncertainty as to what industry we're going to be coming back into. Yeah. I've certainly gotten some voiceover things that I'm like, are they going to record my voice and then just use it for in perpetuity? There are a lot of questions that are left unanswered, but as many people have been waiting for the 118 days, the writers did a great job of being intentional about the language that they had in their contracts. Sure. Right, yeah. Writers would. That makes sense. Yeah. But that solidarity, once they had that ratified for them, that it had never faded because there were many writers that were alongside us in the strikes. I was on the road in LA and was able to picket alongside some folks. Yeah. And being able to integrate movement intentionally into my everyday life, whether it's on the block or petitions or organizing specifically for mutual aid in New York or across the nation, which we can get into eventually too. Yeah. But yeah, like it was so important not only for wages, residuals, because of the streaming implementation, the way that it had rolled out, and there were no protections or ways to actually make a living off of residuals like people did on cable network television. You get some fat, juicy residual checks, but then like streaming, you get like 40 cents.
Which is translating across depending industries like music and film.
Yes, very similar.
Shows, pretty much anything that has streaming right now. And if you are someone who makes residual or royalties or whatever, it's like very, very, very low because of the nature of it.
I think it's because of the supply and demand, they say, since it's so readily accessible. Then they're like, well, nobody has to pay a cable network for this much to then get back in our pockets. But I have my thoughts and my qualms, but I do know that as we've seen the circular nature of movement work, there will be a time where the next generation of artists, which I'll still be a part of, will be striking for even better conditions so that we can get what we deserve.
Yeah, and hopefully we can make the adjustments necessary. I mean, we live in a place where,
I know I'm going to be a producer, and I am a producer now. Yes. It's like, I see holes everywhere in the ways that we do things. Exactly. I'm starting with like theater producing because that's really where home is and how I've seen like the system belly up very, very interestingly. But the goal is to have a multimedia platform to restore indigenous land back stories, indigenous being from Africa, from anywhere in the world. As somebody who has been exiled from my own land, from Haiti, as early as when I was 8 months, and I've never been back. My only portal to home is my family and my family's testimony. So that's where my storytelling is starting to mature and get into producing, so I can make different rules that don't fucking suck. That don't suck for the collective. So
and what you're saying sounds, it sounds incredible, and it sounds like something that anybody would want to be a part of, but it's very challenging, and it's not as and it's not as glorious or heroic as it may seem. It's very difficult. You're fighting against a lot of forces that have a lot of power and will can, destroy whatever you're actively trying to pursue at any moment. And sometimes they don't even have to be, knowing actors that are doing that to you. It can just be, like we said, the systems that are in place right now, or even sometimes yourself. And like you said earlier, you said 3 years deep, questioning yourself, like, why, how could I ever do anything about this? Or why would I ever think that I have any kind of say or power or, even knowledge to get this kind of thing done? But, you have to keep fighting.
Learning, yeah.
Keep fighting.
That's been the journey in cycles too for me. The hardest for like the 3 years I'm talking about CoSpace. Time was when it was a year after George Floyd's murder. And people were like, well, Biden's elected. We're free
we
now.
Can sit back. Yeah, we're chilling.
And it was like, actually, what? Did we not read the same chapters or watch the same video? What is going on? And of course, like the polarization that has been very intentionally woven by media of like defund versus abolish versus all these things. And like seeing for the first time, because again, like this was my exposure to the world at full without being protected by the witnesses, I would say. There are a lot of rules and regulation or principles that they had, like not standing up for the national anthem, which I'm very grateful for because I've never had to say anything about these here states of America. To whom? Who am I pledging allegiance to? I have no. So between that and like other principles that I think align with the fact that like, hey, the world is the system is not sustainable. Whether they call it the system of things by the devil or capitalism, they would never say capitalism. But like those are the very systems that they said Jesus was going to come and save, and like we would live eternally in paradise for that. But what, as an organizer, I'm able to see is that like no spiritual entity is going to just like emerge and change everything. Like, this is sure that might be the way that the story goes in terms of the Bible and things, and but it's actually within our realm. Like we're the ones that are supposed to be in control of our own destiny. That's what humankind has been all along. So we can't imagine it differently. It's only been designed this way by certain people who had a vision for this. We have a vision for us to actually win and have our rights and have everything that we deserve. So to be one of those designers of a new world amidst plenty of organizers I've made community with, because when I did have those questions of like, who am I was like, well, I just saw this person, Solaris, I'm gonna name drop here, Solaris Capehart, who was educating folks on abolition on TikTok. And I was like, they say that they're in Bed-Stuy, that means they're close. Like I can just DM and see like if they want to hang out for coffee or something. And a lot of my movement mentors are people that I met in lockdown on the internet.
Wow.
And like we're able to be in community now and build together and in solidarity and also throw ass. Like we're humans beyond the work that demands a lot of our attention, but we intentionally weave rest in because we've seen our elders who have been worked to the ground or been put on watch lists for caring for our people. I actually just met some folks in Albuquerque, made possible by way of CoSpace's resource directory. I was like, okay, let's do a volunteer effort. And a couple of Hadestown cast members joined me to be a part of a mutual aid trip. And in being in community with them, like a space like Albuquerque, New Mexico, that is right, that used to be Mexico, as we know. It's much more polarized there to be doing mutual aid and revolutionary work. These people are on watch lists by the government to just try and deter them from being a part of survival work. So thinking about how that community spans and the various levels of engagement that there are. I hope that encourages people to continue to find their own space in the movement, whether it's as an artist or as anything, as a student, anything in between.
Yeah, for sure. Of all the things that you said, I really do appreciate that in your rhetoric and your language, you are very, very, you have a heavy emphasis on community and the people around you and the people that you've met and who you do this with. And I love that because, you know, like I said, there are some parallels, and the parallels that I was speaking on are, I was raised in a Christian household, a Pentecostal Christian, so you know, it was very much so, not as, of course, insulated and kind of like,
This is the only community you can
you
be
know,
with,
yeah,
right?
exactly. It wasn't that much,
Cultish,
but
yeah.
it was similar in a lot of ways, and they kind of did it naturally to you. It was almost more passive than active in that way. And when you're in those communities, you oftentimes you know, when you're out, or when you get out of those communities, you kind of shed all of the things that you had learned, and you start to have disdain and almost resentment for the things that you learned in those spaces. But one of the things that I feel like we did too much shedding of is that community-oriented lifestyle.
Oh, yeah.
And we are very isolationist in this, and it's leading to a lot of loneliness, and a lot of feelings where it's like, who am I? You know, what can I do? The reason why, and I used to think about this all the time. I was like, why? How did our even my parents, or my grandparents, make it through what they made it through? I was thinking about my grandma, and she was telling us stories of how she used to have to climb a mountain in Puerto Rico just to get water.
You're from PR?
My parents
from
are from
Family
Puerto Rico.
Okay,
Yeah,
beautiful.
my family is.
Yes.
Yeah. How she would climb those mountains, get water for all of these kids. They had so many kids, and if she didn't make that happen, and she was like 12, she didn't make that happen.
Wow.
They weren't gonna have water, right? And I think about, like, how in the world do you survive those conditions? The only answer is community. The only through line from that age to now, it's not the internet obviously exists now. It's not the fact that, you know, they were naturally more resilient, or they just had, it was community. It was not only the conditions, but also the fact that they had people that were in similar conditions, and they were taught how to survive in those conditions. And that is something that I feel like you are heavily emphasizing, and I really do appreciate that, because more people need to understand that's how they made it through. That's how they survived.
Yeah. Thank you for that affirmation, and for sharing a bit about your family story too. Like, I hear stories of that similarly from my grandmother. She was a single mom of two in Haiti. Taking those kids to school and back on a camion is basically like a double-decker bus. That certainly doesn't look like the ones that we have in Times Square.
And I'm sure the streets were not as
paved
nice
or anything. You know, I think about those times, and if it weren't for family, community, and that was the first thing to feel like it had gone, because all I had was chosen family when I left the Witnesses 5 years ago. Chosen family within the arts, my queers, my everybody that has seen my light and my life before I had left the Witnesses. And so, like, the first thing that I felt had left me was my Haitianness, because all the Haitians that I knew were Jehovah's Witnesses. Elders, cousins, brothers, sisters, all those folks that were in the faith. And so in my reclamation of that over the last, I would say 3 years, because it was 2020 when I actually sat down and was like, how do we get free? Like, what? We were the first. I keep hearing, like, we were the first African nation to set ourselves free, and we're the blueprint. I love that for us. I truly do. Similar to how Palestine is very much a blueprint of how we can, one, declare we will not be suffering in silence. The colonizer has their foot on their necks. Absolutely no. Like, we're gonna make sure that our testimony is what is able to transfer and translate through the mediums that we're talking about, like social media and stuff. And so if it weren't for me diving into ancestral, like, spiritual traditions, like Vodun, a lot of people hear Vodun and it's like, oh my God! But it's all it is means is spirit. And breath, and how we're able to share breath together, see each other as humans, and our power together to set ourselves free. So all that to say is community is everything, and I will never open my mouth to be like, self-made, look at me go, because if it weren't for the couches that I've surfed on, if it weren't for the people that had food, like, made sure that I was fed in the last 5 years, I would not be here. And, like, from even before the 5 years too, like, another thing I'm grateful for the Witnesses. Materialism, like, that's not a thing of mine, or think individualism is never hasn't seeped into my spirit. And it never will be seeping into my spirit either. So
That's good.
I'm happy to carry that legacy along.
That's beautiful. I love that. And on the topic of community, you built and founded Claim Our Space now.
Yes, that's right.
And this is what you've been referring to with co-spaces is like the short
Yes,
for this,
that
right?
word.
Yes, it is.
It seems like a tech version of our name,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
Claim Our
it's funny.
Space now, yes.
You with that, your organization, your nonprofit, right?
Yes.
You provide community resources and actions, and you do a variety of things with that organization to provide for your community. What inspired you? We've talked a lot about it, I'm sure already, and you've mentioned it passively. But what was the direct inspiration to creating this organization?
I will say I was living in lockdown with my grandmother. It was me and grandma, and I saw that all of the protests were erupting once. Even it was before George Floyd's lynching. I saw Ahmaud Arbery. I was like, okay, that's we were just being normalized to all of these black deaths in our faces. Brianna, and then I was like, there's has to be a way for us to mobilize beyond hashtags. I see people sharing resources, but they only stay on for 24 hours in your story. Where does that go? It just goes into the ethers. What about the community that needs support long term? And how can we build to dismantle systems and educate ourselves on all of these large concepts that have been talked about for centuries, and how do we make that as accessible as possible for people so that we know that, hey, okay, it was on lockdown, like I said. Not everybody could be in protest. I couldn't go out on the streets because I was living with my grandmother. But a way that I was able to organize was online and building this resource. I was finishing my computer science degree at the time too. So it was like, okay, so there's a tech element here. Like, how do we streamline these resources in a way that will always be accessible beyond social media? And then the second part of that is also staying educated and inspired, because I knew that we're talking about cycles and they're exhausting. Like, we get burnt out.
So, yeah.
I felt burnout in all kinds of realms. And finally, I feel like we've been building a collective practice together, just to announce like what our mission is. It's ritualizing community care and action to dismantle white supremacy and save all Black lives. That word ritual is very intentional because it's a practice that we built together. It's not something that it can be prescribed. It's going to be different from each community, from each location that we touch, but the core of our work is, again, making resources and actions accessible. Because there really is no excuse to not pull up. We can say like, I'm healing, I'm exhausted. Ooh, not me hitting the camera. Is everything okay? All right, okay. And like we get stuck in our own shit all the time.
We do.
But as somebody who exists as a Black queer immigrant, all these, like, I could get stuck in my shit, but my shit happens to be other people's too. So how can we see each other's humanity beyond like the segments of our identities, and realize that like we are all up against this same system of delusion, white delusion that has cast its net far and wide by way of empires, whether it was the UK, the United States, that is on, it's ticking. It's almost the end, I swear. I know it. Period. Provide. Let me sip this water before I start spilling tea too. But in the event, because empires rise and fall, we've been thinking specifically about general strikes because as we saw, I think there was the global strike for Palestine on Monday this week and Tuesday the next day. But without the resources in place to hold us through that, like I can't ask a single mother of three in Kansas to strike and strike McDonald's, because that's the only thing that's accessible to her in a food desert. So how do we make sure that resources around her are able to provide for her and her family and things like that? So that's another thing that CoSpace is a challenge that we're hoping to build along the axis of, and our resource directory is great and has been able to support that
that's great.
Very actively. So like you said, we do a lot of things, but it's all streamlined in making resources accessible to break down that barrier of like, I'm an activist. Everybody has the possibility to pull up and pull up for our survival. So
that's great. Yeah, do you speak on the things that were in the past were only typically accessible to more politically oriented people, that had, you know, a history of it or had a, you know, some kind of connection to it.
Right.
And with the resources that we have now, anybody can kind of be a part of that mission or that journey, and whichever one you choose to kind of like, you know, be more involved in, because, you know, it's the job of an organizer like you to kind of be able to provide resources in every fight that you feel connected to, or that you feel like is important, you know. But as an individual who wants to be a part of that, you don't have to take on the burden of everything, right? You don't have to come into this and be expected to fight every battle that you see, right? You can, you have the opportunity to make your voice known and kind of push a cause forward. You don't have to, through the community, you don't have to bear the burden of fixing the world's problems, right?
That's right. And that's what I had to learn.
Yes, and that's...
and that have been learning over the last couple of years. It's
Okay.
like, yeah, I'm not doing this alone. We might have a small team because it's all volunteer.
Of course.
It's all collective turn 501c3.
Yeah.
And so we're not on salary. A lot of people assume that I am. I'm like, nah, y'all. I'm
Like, no, this is a bit different. Yeah.
It's purely because I know that this is for our survival. It's for my survival, for collective survival. And the team that we have is mostly made up of creatives who have other skills and talents. Like we were talking about Notion just earlier. Notion is Mahela's bread and butter. I had no idea what project management software we were going to use. I just knew it had to be free. Because we, you know, like trying to cut costs to make sure that all of the money is not in operations, but rather on the block with mutual aid for
Which is beautiful.
our Marsha's Closet events and eventual food pop-ups as well in Brooklyn is the hope for next year. In managing and business, I was like, how does this happen? I'm 23 with a nonprofit, SOS. What does this mean? So if it weren't for like my mentors and folks, whether they were on the axis of like, this is how you run a business versus the practice of abolition. I've been very lucky to be surrounded by everybody that I needed to continue to fuel this vision as it's transformed and also gone back to its first iteration too, because with each group of people, or like I'm thinking in Creole, mélange, mix of folks that we have, because we work asynchronously. We also know that as we live in the empire, things happen. We're founded in the pandemic, so it's never like this is due now. Like deadlines do not exist for us. And I'm glad that that's a practice of ours, because again, like it is always a state of emergency outside.
Yeah.
And this work is never supposed to detract from us. It should be filling us up. So the way that we work is purely on like transparency of like, y'all, I'm tapped. How can we reorient? It's always about building collectively with the people that we've got. And it's something I'm very proud of. The fact that we've been able to dismantle white supremacy within the work culture too. Because as somebody who's never run a nonprofit before, we gonna make new rules. We gonna break it and start again. Things I'm proud of, and the people that help us get there.
Yeah, and I appreciate the active nature of what you're saying as well. Most people are just talk. Most people have all of the buzzwords, and they understand all of they have a general understanding of all of the ways that you can virtue signal and be, holier than thou, and like I'm better because I understand that, this and that. But in your rhetoric, you can clearly tell that you have the action behind the words, and you are doing this actively. And if for anybody who's watching, if you want to know how to do this actively, and you don't want to just be that person who knows all the buzzwords, this is, Marla is the person to definitely check out whenever you can, for sure.
I do love to talk, but I would like walking the walk much more.
It's much better to walk the walk. It's much harder, but it's where you get the work done. When you talk about ritualizing community care in action, what does that mean exactly to you, and why do you feel like that's so important?
Sure. I mean, especially as somebody who has my hands in a lot of different pots.
Yes.
It can be hard to even think about survival. It's like, well, I'm going to go audition now, and I'm going to do that. I've always had a lot on my plate ever since I was here in the city as a kid, between like bass practice. I was an instrumentalist coming up in the faith in school. Going to visit my mom at babysitting. Like there was always something coming up on the schedule. So I know what it's like to feel like you're at capacity. But knowing that there's a way that we're all liberated enough to carve out our time.
Yes.
It's all about the intentionality. Like if we set an intention to say like, I'm going to go to the grocery store today.
Yeah.
You better go to that grocery store today. Otherwise you're not going to have groceries for the rest of the week.
Yeah.
So if you say that you're going to like pull up and do mutual aid consistently, it doesn't have to be every day. I certainly don't have the energy to do that.
It's really
there might be folks that are out there that can
and have the resources to do so.
Correct.
As well.
So the motion of ritualizing community care is just emphasizing that it's going to look different for everybody.
Yeah.
A doctor can ritualize community care by making sure that they're listening to a Black mother who's talking about the pain that she's feeling in her belly, so that there's not another black mother dying on the table because she was being ignored due to white supremacy. You know, like they're minute, that it can always be implemented in every source of life. And I think of liberation as a faith practice too. Like you have to have faith in the fact that you can be free to set yourself on that path. This is not to sound like woo woo zhu zhu at all, but like it's genuinely a state of being, a state of mind. And if you don't have community to remind you that, if you don't have the practice that you're able to build yourself, because nobody's going to build it for you. It's an intentional act that we get to carve together and are always in dialogue about. For our merch designer, for instance, Kazkan, who I also had found in the pandemic. I was like, you're Afro punk energy. Yeah, we need this as part of our merch. And so like talking about, we had on IG Live this year talking about how we have to imagine ourselves in freedom to be able to build towards it, because otherwise we've already lost the battle. So thinking of it as less of a battle and more of a, okay, how can I suit up? Because we're not to be in fight mode all the time. It ain't comfortable, it ain't cute, and I certainly deserve better. Ease is the bottom line there too. So that's something that we work towards in our ritual intentionally there. And it means a lot to be able to be on the road and still be able to pull up and meet new folks in Albuquerque, for instance, who are doing
being on the road makes it
similar work.
Makes it even more effective.
And if anything, I want people to see that like if I could do it, y'all, I know y'all could pull up. If I because between the things that I do, sometimes I just scratch my head. I'm like, how did I do that? I know I haven't done it alone, but it's possible. And if somebody in New York who is bustling between 3 jobs doesn't have time in person to show up for volunteer work, you could sign a petition at claimourspacenow.org. Go ahead, /action items. That's you've done a practice. So you've made a practice of doing one thing, and that has actually moved the movement forward in your own way. So that's what I would say it means to me.
No, that's beautiful. I love it. There are so many ways to be active, and it can be as simple as educating yourself as well. Educating yourself is, and I would say that
I love me a panel.
Even more so than most things that people are doing now. Is I feel like that's a little bit lacking in certain communities, is that being willing to educate yourself and being willing to not only educate yourself and follow people that you are learning from and not just emulating, right? Actually learning how to be learning how to ritualize it for yourself, like you said, but also seeing challenging your perspectives as well. When you have the freedom of mind, when you have the free space to do that, you don't have to always be fighting and debating and always arguing in circles that you don't want to be in, but being willing to understand the walks of life that make these kinds of struggles so difficult, because there are people in those walks of life that want things to stay the same, and because it's really effective for them. And understanding that, in some ways other people will have to sacrifice in ways that they might not want to get what you need. Being able to understand that makes it more human, and makes your fight, it gives you more conviction in what you do, because you understand things. You're not just guessing because the person next to me is saying this and I think that they're right and I trust them. You hear what they say and you're like, I know what they're saying and I fully back that with no questions asked. Like I understand where I'm coming from. Sometimes you need that conviction, and I feel like people are a bit afraid to do that sometimes, and I do this as well. Like, you know, challenging yourself. You know, sometimes it's a little bit easier to remain ignorant on certain things, just so that you don't have to. And that
ignorance is bliss, as they say.
Yeah, and it happens more so on. You know, there are other communities that need to hear that probably more than the ones that might be listening to this now, but you know, it's still.
Who knows where this will reach, baby?
Yeah, I guess you do. You never really know, I guess. But I really do appreciate everything that you've said thus far, and it's refreshing for sure because I don't get to have these kinds of conversations too often. Because most of the work that we do with this is kind of, you know, we're centered on the industry, just talking about the arts. But I do have a foot in that realm as well. So it's nice to have these conversations. Local politics is really, you know, and I won't call what you do exactly local politics because that's like a game that, you know, that's a whole game. But
and another conversation.
It's a whole other conversation, yeah. But with your work, what you do, you are affecting that realm as well. And getting people more involved is always important. More involved in the community.
The role of 100%. The artist is to make the revolution irresistible.
Yeah.
So I take that
that's beautiful.
Everywhere I go. Ever since, and I actually found that quote from Toni K. Bambara, and I've been reading her a book of her interviews recently. And by recently, I mean like over the last 3 years, because there's so many nuggets of just wisdom on every page.
Yeah.
But that quote had landed, and I was like, "Yep," and that's my purpose, huh? Like, and all, you know, it's easy to be like, I'm an artist and I paint, and that's all.
Yeah.
But I always like to circle back to the why, whether it's a condition of me having to grow up with critical thinking with the witnesses and being like, y'all saying this, but actually, you know, talking about challenging and challenging critically in whether it's in education or things that we're ingesting in our art or ingesting in our surroundings, period. And I think that's probably what always keeps me active. It's because like there's always something to be not critical like negatively, but just like thinking of it differently and how can we restructure it. For sure. Yeah, I'm a mad scientist that way. So,
that's great.
I encourage everyone to. It comes from childlike wonder too, because I'm seeing life all in new lenses for the first time, and I hold on to that any chance I get. And it definitely influences my performance every night in Hadestown. It is never the same. People have been telling me they're like, you've never given the same choice a single time 1 week. I was like, I'm up here playing. This is supposed to be play. Hello?
That's what people come to see. Yeah, that's what people come to see.
Yes, indeed.
It's beautiful.
I'll be back on the East Coast come March and April. New Haven, Philly, Boston. So I know that for folks that might be listening that are on the East Coast, that's where we'll be closest. And you'll see this bundle of chaos and love and community for your very eyes. Hadestown.com/tour.
I love it. Great plug. Speaking more about your theatrical background and producing as well, you were selected to be a part of 2023 Producing 101 cohort in partnership with the Theater Producers of Color, correct? What is that exactly? Can you mind enlightening us on what that would be?
So I didn't know about it before applying. My director for my cabaret show, Paulie Pontrelli, they had gotten the application and were like, "Hey, you should apply to this too." And after a sold out run in January at the Green Room, filled with friends, family, and new fans too that came to see the show. Which basically walked through my life from leaving the witnesses and then to the goddess I've been reborn as in movement, in the arts, etc. So I was like, okay, I've now produced a show without any real template. I know I had to pay my people, and that was one thing I knew for sure. I was like, I'm not gonna ask my friends to do this shit for free. Like there's labor, there's energy involved and expended. I'm gonna set the precedent, even though this is my very first project, like paying friends and paying folks. Like, even if it's not a whole lot, my music director is going to get paid.
Yeah.
My man who was on the guitar is going to get paid. All this stuff. So like, that was my first shot at it. And I was like, okay, people are asking me, when's the next one? And I have no money.
Yeah,
So
no
like,
idea.
where do I turn to? Is it grants? Is it, like I tweeted about it. I set the intention. I was like, I know I'm going to find this. Anybody have any resources and people to send me to, let me know. And Polly had sent me that link. And then I saw the application. I was like, okay, they've had at least 2 other cohorts before. And they're led by theater producers of color.
Yeah.
So folks that have shows on Broadway right now.
It's incredible.
The How to Dance in Ohio was actually one of our what do you call it? Like case studies for how to produce and like do research, build a team. Truly like the ins and outs of what has been gatekept by the white producers of Broadway and commercial theater for a very long time. Because if anybody has a question in that circle, they're like, hey dad, what do I do now? Like, and for people of color who have been barred from those spaces for so long, we have to like truly climb and claw and try and find these resources. But this was a free tuition course that I was blessed to be a part of. I think it was 11 weeks from like March through June or so.
Wow.
We presented our show. I was able to present A Goddess Reborn in the Disney theatrical offices, which was like wild to me still to this day. I was like, wait. Yeah. Things that we were able to sit in and reflect on. This 2023 has been truly wild to think about, and that's going to be my homework for the next week or so, to be like, what happened this year?
What worked?
And all the things that worked were things that I put my mind to, and was like, I don't have the resources now, but I know that people do, and all I have to do is ask for help.
Yeah.
Asking for help has been the biggest change maker for me, because we've been taught to think that we're all alone on this, and American dream. Yeah. If you could see it, you could believe it, and forget everybody else around you. Yeah. And as we know, the American dream does not exist. And 2, the resources are always around. Whether that's nature, the Mother Earth, literally giving us all that we've ever needed and then some.
Yeah.
That is very much manifested in community too. So grateful for Polly for sending that link to me, and I was accepted, able to do the rest of the run, and met amazing producers that I've been in contact with and building with ever since.
That's really cool
as well. So.
And the story that was A Goddess Reborn.
Yes, and was actually commissioned for it. Again, so I did it in January, the cabaret show, and then I was invited to do a 30-minute cut of it.
Nice.
Which was also racking my brain. I was like,
how do I get this?
I can do this in 70 minutes because then I have like songs I can speak, I can do my little ditty or whatever. But 30 minutes of my life? What am I going to do? But it was... it
worked out.
It was perfect for what it was.
Nice.
And just blessed that it was another opportunity to produce and write too. Yeah. I don't speak or tell people that I'm a writer, but I guess I have prose. I'll be writing.
It's good. You've been doing everything, which is awesome. It was really great. And how old? You're 23 right now?
26.
26.
Yes.
You were 23.
I was 23.
26 now.
3 years have passed. I'm now 26 years of age.
That's great. But yeah, no, that's awesome. We're so young, and so much time to go, and so many things to achieve, and there's so many opportunities for us. But
we'll never sleep on ourselves. That's
exactly
my biggest affirmation that I wrote in because this is filmed around the new moon in Sagittarius. I don't know if you ascribe to those, but it is my moon sign, Sagittarius fire. And one of the biggest things that I wrote in my journal for like the new year and like just life is to never feel like I'm backed into a corner, whether that's by myself or from other people. And also remembering that I have everything that I ever need to achieve all the things that I need to do. I am that doll.
That's beautiful.
We are all that doll. Let's remember that. Yay. Okay, that's what I want to say.
No, that's perfect. Honestly, usually I end the show with asking the guests for like words of wisdom, but that's literally all we needed.
Out for you.
That's amazing.
Don't let nobody back you into no corner.
Yeah.
You have everything that you need. It's always about the resources, how we're allocating them, whether that's like brain resource time, there are so many different ways we can look at resources.
For sure. So many ways.
Space.
Yes.
You know, space that we get to share together in community. And that is all within our reach.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Well, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I had
sharing.
such a blast.
I'm glad. Me too. It was a great time.
Thank
I love
you.
it. You are very what can I say? You're natural in conversation, which is appreciated.
Thank you, sir.
And
I'm giggling only
okay.
because I never stop.
That's great. It's one of the traits, honestly, in my opinion, it's one of the traits you need to do the things that you're doing, for sure.
Yeah, and
You need it.
Mostly because I was a very shy kid coming up too.
Me too.
So this is all okay, boom. So it's just like all of that energy is coming out.
That's great. Theater was actually the thing that brought me out of my shy corner.
We have so much to talk about.
I love it. I love it.
Thank you.
Before you go,
Yes.
any ways that we can support? How can the audience
Oh
that's
my gosh,
watching right
let
now
me look right into the camera.
catch you?
Hello, friends. So you can find me at my website, marlalou.com, for any information, bookings. When I'm back in the city, I will be back on my model tip. So let the girls know. What else? For producing inquiries as well, commercial, all of that's on my website. Instagram at Marla Lou _. I don't use Twitter turned X anymore, but like Marla Lou _ there. And yeah, always here for dialogue of anything that I've shared about my story or, the things in the work that I do that comes from spirit and from a desire to be free. I'm always happy to hold conversations. So like shoot me a DM, shoot me an email. I'm always happy to be in dialogue.
That's beautiful.
Yes.
I love it. Everything, description as well, all the links and stuff. So
yes, thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Eddie.
Yeah, thank you.
Project
Thank you,
Feel
Marla.
out.
Let's go. That's great.